welcome to Botswana.
Thank you so much, my sister, and good morning to you and your viewers at home. It's good to be here. You have a very lovely country.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, okay, let's kickstart our conversation here. You're well known for mentorship, of course, coaching,
Yes.
motivational speaking, but now we're seeing you, of course, addressing challenges faced by African countries and African young people and focusing on climate change. Really, what is this, the inspiration behind this? Why did you get into this space of focusing on climate change communication?
I must say I have to acknowledge a friend of mine, Veronica Kundu from Zimbabwe, who invited me into the space. She's in climate change financing. I'm in communication and media at the University of Johannesburg. So she invited me when I was speaking in Zimbabwe in 2023 to say, hey, let's do something. Let's do some research on young people and climate change. I'm in young people. I deal with young people. My study is in the media and young people. So she was like, let's then add the component of climate change, especially because seemingly young people are left out in the conversation of climate change. So we wanted to look at how can we better communicate the issue of climate change, especially for young people.
Right. Now let's zone into your visit now to Botswana. What are we seeing in Botswana, and why is Botswana a key part of the study? Maybe you can highlight or touch on really what's going to be going on during your visit here in Botswana.
So basically Botswana is part of the 8 countries that are part of my study. So I'm looking at effectively communicating climate change for young people in SADC. And in SADC I've sampled 8 countries out of 16. Of course I would love to do all 16 of them, but financially it's not feasible at the moment. So Botswana is part of the countries that I've sampled, looking at the heat waves, the floods that Botswana and the neighboring countries, including my country, which is actually going through floods at the moment. So I want to look at these issues and how we can better communicate it to young people, especially because we are the youngest continent. That's number one. Number two, young people are the future of this continent. So if we better communicate, or if we hear from them how we can better communicate, especially me and you, because I'm in the media, teaching communication in media, and when you are in the media, it's a study that will actually help even you, helping climate change policy makers on how we can actually have the conversation to reach young people who are expected to take action on the issue of climate change. And I'm going around these countries recruiting climate change communication specialists or climate change communication activists who are going to go out there in their respective communities to communicate the issue of climate change. That's basically my visit, and it has been quite an amazing response from young people. From yesterday, I had a very important and amazing conversation with them.
Let's get into that. I actually want to understand what you have seen so far. By far, young people in Botswana, how do they perceive a climate change communication? Like you're saying it sounds like it was interesting.
It was interesting. Yeah. It was interesting. I mean, I'm seeing a pattern. Remember, not remember because you were not with me. I've been traveling, and Botswana is the 5th country, 6th country, and I'm seeing a pattern. And young people in Botswana are fascinated about the conversation. There are those that are quite not really interested, but there were a couple of them among the group that I interacted with that were very, very much interested in the conversation. There are some that are already active in the space, and I've realized that there is some work that the media has to do, and I don't want to share much because some of these things they've shared in confidence, but one point that took my mind, and I've been thinking about it. It was raised by a young person who's I think, studying journalism, who said we need to have a situation in Botswana where the media is allowed to actually cover these stories without having government coming to sort of like control how many people died from the flooding, how many people were affected, or how many farmers. He said something very interesting to say the press or the media should be allowed to report things as they are without sugarcoating, without trying to protect, maybe panic from the public, which I think the point is we probably don't communicate the issue of climate change in other countries, especially in SADC, because we're trying to, cover some of these things and not report them as climate change effects. So I'm learning a lot, and I'm excited to sit down and look at what these young people have said in all these 8 countries.
Right. That sounds like one of the findings, or to one of the questions that I was going to ask you next. You've already answered part of it. The key gaps of communication or raising awareness. If the media can, to some extent, be hindered in relaying important and true information, that I take it as part of the answer. But what were some of those, the key gaps of communication, taking the communication or relaying, disseminating information and raising awareness? What are those gaps that we have identified here in Botswana?
In Botswana, what the young people have raised was that the media doesn't really communicate to them in a way that they will want to consume, the news about climate change and all of that. So I think there is a need for the media to sort of catch up, as they use those kind of words, to catch up with what are young people consuming, where are they consuming, which platforms do they use, and then the media starts to disseminate the issue of climate change or climate change communication using those platforms. They've pointed out a number of ways, fascinating ways to communicate issues of climate change, and they said we need to educate young people at a very young age. They said the government, especially the Department of Basic Education, needs to roll out programs with the media showcasing those programs that will be run in primary schools, where young people are taken to excursions. They are taught about climate change at a very young age.
Right. I like the fact that you're always going ahead of me. You answered the next question. Right. Okay, now that being the case, let's talk about the role that youth play in influencing climate policy, action to be taken both at national and regional levels. What are those platforms actually that can be created, if at all there are none, from what you were saying, but in terms of policy, at policy level, what are those strategies that can be employed?
They raised, and I'm sharing this because they raised very fascinating points. One of them raised competitions as part of something that could attract young people to take part. They said there was a competition, and there's an upcoming event in June 11 to 12, or a workshop where young journalists who are supposed to be communicating the issue of climate change and shaping policy. They said a competition will attract young people, and proposals, support, on proposals that they have, financial support. They pointed out that, so that they don't just be part of the climate change conversation, but they take part. And I urge young people to be there in the conversation. I had young people who are in youth parliament in Botswana amongst the young people that were there, and it was quite fascinating that young people are active. I had SRC members that were part of the conversation yesterday, and it's quite fascinating for me to see that they could be part of the policy making and policy changes that needs to occur in Botswana and in the SADC region.
Now, that being the case, of course, from your experience, you seeing young people coming through in large numbers and, of course, with excitement as well. But how can stakeholders also come through? How can they meet these young people halfway? Government, media, you've already spoken about it, the civil society. What is it that they can do to make sure that they create support? They support and they make it effective what the young people are doing. Their enthusiasm is not laid to waste. What is it that can be done?
I think let's go back to encouraging young people to be part of what is happening. Let us not dismiss them by this whole notion that young people are not interested. They are interested in having fun. There are young people who are interested in farming. There are young people who are in agribusiness, which are affected by climate change. There are young people who are in entertainment that are affected by climate change, by the way. I learned that in Lesotho, where they complained that they are in business, and especially entertainment business, when these climate changes, rains, heat, their businesses are affected. So I think as stakeholders, let us involve them, let us bring them, let us have conversation at home, because mama or our grandmothers and grandfathers, they have been engaging on the issue of climate change, by the way. It's just that now they need to relay that information and help young people understand how they can preserve, the environment, and how can they curb the scourge of climate change. I think civil organizations, they need to target young people. They spoke about incentives, which I mean, sometimes it's not money. Incentives, there are a lot of ways to incentivize young people to be part of the conversation. So I think government, NGOs or NPOs, they need to incentivize young people to be part of this conversation.
Right. All right. Now, Mr. Gameda, we are closing down our conversation. Now, this is my last question to you as we zone it down. How prepared are young people in the SADC region to lead, change, and gearing towards going green, just climate change communication? How ready are we?
I'm laughing because that's one of my last questions in my focus group questions that I asked all these countries. I've asked young people, are you prepared to change your lifestyle? Are young people in Botswana, in Namibia, in Eswatini, are they prepared to change their lifestyle to accommodate the need to preserve the environment and be part of the climate change action? And it's quite fascinating that they all said, no, we acknowledge that we need to play our part, but to be involved, it's something else. So it makes me really call upon young people, especially in SADC, especially in Africa, in many parts of Africa where climate change is affecting big time, to be part of the day-to-day action to preserve the environment, to make sure that we have a cleaner and sustainable environment. So they are interested, but I think they need a little bit of push, a little bit of convincing, and I hope support. And I hope through this study, through the findings, through the report, and I'm hoping to come back and have trainings, workshops, engagements in communities where we can then get them involved.
All right, Mr. Gameda, thank you so much for your time this morning. Absolutely, we wish your next trips that you're going to make to other SADC countries great success. And of course, this is a very important thing and a talk of the town, every city and every country. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to your viewers at home.
All right, stay with us. We'll be right back.
Welcome to beautiful Botswana, where the warmth of her people and wildlife is welcoming, where the vibrancy of her land echoes in the unforgettable voices of her people. Come and see Botswana.